Welcome to our panel, which is called Creativity, a Gift, Cultivated, or More. Is creativity, is it a creative gene? Is everyone born creative? Are some people born more creative? Can creativity be developed in the right environment?
Yeah, so there's a lot of research on creativity and quite a bit of things now in neuroscience. It's reasonably clear that everyone is exactly the same creativity, has the same creative potential. And then what happens is the potential gets blocked by various, activities that you do. But once you unblock those things, you're as creative as anyone. Creativity always gets pushed into the arts. Are you a musician, a singer, a writer, a poet? Creativity and talent are completely different things. Everyone is creative. When you were 4 years old, running around the house, before you learned, that the grown-ups wanted you to just shut up and sit down, you were very creative. That doesn't mean you're equally talented as Mozart in writing, sonatas, or equally talented as Shakespeare in writing plays. Talent's a different thing. But creativity is a human trait, and it's an intrinsic motivation. Everyone is equally curious and creative.
There's a landmark study by NASA. It's the longest running study on children. And they found out that kids under 5, or the moment you're born, they have 98% creative genius levels. And somehow through the process of going to school, after you graduate, only 2% of that 98% remain as creative genius. So I think innately we're all born creative. No child is born non-creative because there are no boundaries. But somehow it goes away. So just to dispel the notion that you have to be special, then you're creative, I don't think that's true.
Another thing I want to look at is that it's a notion that many people think that when you are creative, somehow you're disruptive or you're unconventional. Yeah. So Chi-Ying, can you say more about this? And also, can you give us a definition of creativity?
Sure. How do we define creativity nowadays? Actually, based on the famous scholars at Harvard Business School, Teresa Amabile, who is the most famous creativity scholar. Her definition of creativity is a novel and useful idea. So here, don't forget that she also mentioned about usefulness. So nowadays, when we define creativity, it's not just about being unconventional or trying to become a unique or even odd person. Actually, eventually, what needs to be contributed out of a creative person is useful ideas that can improve the situation, that can generate new solutions for the conventional questions.
I've never seen a brave idea where it's not presented by a brave person who is then usually seen by his society as eccentric because he goes against the norm. All ideas that are novel will be groundbreaking, true, and never been done before. It requires bravery at the start, self-belief.
What environmental factors are most influential in shaping creativity? And specifically, Chi-Ying, you're the expert on Gyasuism. Get us going, please.
And actually, the most groundbreaking research about creativity recently is that multicultural contact and multicultural experiences can boost up individual creativity. Hey, if this is the case, then Singaporeans should be very creative, right? Because we have a multicultural society over here. Supposedly, based on the theory, based on the research findings, Singaporeans should be creative, but we don't believe that, and we don't see that in nowadays. So what's going on? So I tried to dig into these topics, and then I found 2 key inhibitors that would kill the benefits of creativity in Singapore. The first one is the tight culture. We understand that Singapore is a tight culture. What is a tight culture? That means that there are a lot of strict norms to be followed in the society. And secondly, there is low tolerance for deviance. You cannot make mistakes. Secondly, Gyasu mindset. I think Gyasu is considered a famous or even known for the national personality among Singaporeans. And what is Gyasu? Gyasu means that promote excessive competition, super cautious, and especially not to make mistakes. Follow the rules and try to be ahead of other people, right? And with that kind of mindset, that will also prevent you from we need to try new things. You just want to work hard, follow the rules, and become competitive in a very orderly way. And that would also be something that kill your creativity.
I think one of the reasons why we're bringing some of the mindsets of design to this conversation is because we know lots of organizations in the US context specifically that have used design mindsets to create more creative cultures. So from a leadership perspective, one thing that is really important is helping teams, one, to be more radically diverse, companies and organizations that are able to kind of tease out what are our practices that are for problem finding from the practices that are for problem solving tend to be really fruitful in the work that they do. As a leader, you're wanting to think, where are we? Do we already have a problem that we know we're working on that we might need to be generating more ideas? Or are we actually at the place where we're trying to understand what the problem is at all? This kind of metacognitive aspect of knowing where you are really helps leaders to then support teams to move in the direction that's going to be most fruitful for creativity.
I think it's kiasiism that's the problem. Okay, so if you think about the first generation of pioneer leaders we had in Singapore, they might be kiasu, but they weren't kiasi. Kiasu is afraid to try, kiasi is afraid to die. So kiasi stops you from trying in the first place.
It's the role of a leader, whether that's a team leader or a teacher or a community organizer, to help create conditions where fear of failure isn't the number one thing.
I think our Singapore system teaches us to think too linearly, like you have to succeed this way, and here are the steps to success. But we don't teach that failure is necessary to succeed.
We've been talking about creativity at the workplace. We've been talking about creativity at the cultural level in Singapore. All right. So, give examples of what kinds of different ways of creativity are there? What are different personalities? People always assume, they say broad things like, creativity is thinking out of the box, or creativity is being able to paint something, but it's much more than that.
Creativity starts with you. It's a human thing. Maybe they don't want you to be creative on your job, or maybe, you work in the government and it's bureaucratic and you can't be creative. But everybody I know, then they go home and then they arrange flowers for their creativity, or they go home and they build models. So I think human creativity sort of bursts through the seams, no matter how you try to control it.
Yeah, I think two phrases that I really like that can be used at home, that can be used at work, kind of in any organizational context. How might we and what if? What if we tried ... How might we? That's the frame for any design challenge. It's optimistic, which design always is. I think there are all kinds of exercises that we can do in our commutes, in our mornings, as we're coming home, that can open us up to see the world in a different way. Doesn't mean you're solving a problem per se, but it means you're opening yourself up to potentially see things differently. This is like the key move of not being afraid, is starting with just opening yourself up to see things potentially differently.
Actually, nowadays, our understanding of creativity is that it is indeed a multi-dimensional construct, which means that there is not just one type of creativity. There are multiple types of creativity. The most common one that we can think of is maybe idea generation. That means that it's divergent type of thinking, which means that you can generate a lot of different ideas in order to address one single question. However, more often in our daily life, maybe at work, at school, what we're trying to do is maybe convergent type of creativity. That means that is we try to figure out new ways to solve existing issues. We think of a more efficient way to address the existing issues.
So what I want to ask is, does watching stuff on screen day in and day out, just scrolling, what kind of impact is that on creativity?
You need to understand that when you're scrolling, there's an algorithm. Now, if you scroll and it feeds you the content that you're looking. So if you're looking and scrolling on things that are about new ideas, inventions and all, it will keep feeding you that. So it can work in your favor, but you have to be conscious of what you are watching. And then you figure out ways to now and then extract yourself from the situation, because if not, the algorithm will control and lead your life. It will tell you what to think. It will let you live in your own echo chamber.
I just did a research project with students at Stanford. Particularly the freshmen. Think about it. If you were a senior right now in college, you had chat when maybe your freshman year, sophomore year came in about 2-3 years ago. But if you're a freshman in college, you had chat in high school. So of course you used it to write your college applications.
Oh yeah.
Otherwise you would have been at a disadvantage. And then imagine in 3 years, those freshmen are now seniors, and the freshmen had chat when they were 10. It's going to be a really interesting world, right? Because it's really changing the way we interact with our devices.
Yes, I do want to add to other panelists' comments in terms of how to address this AI issue. Well, this is actually the major challenge we are all facing at universities nowadays, because we cannot stop our students from using AI tools, right? When we give them assignments, they will definitely use AI. So how can we address that, especially in terms of addressing creativity issues? Well, good news is that also based on recent research, if we actually encourage our students to work with AI, treating AI as a collaborator, but not merely taking their outputs as the answers, trying to challenge the answers AI provided with them, trying to collaborate with that AI in order to improve the so-called creative ideas they generate out of the AI algorithm, chances are the students can even improve their own creativity, and the creative outcomes can even better. In other words, we sort of try to coach our students to utilize AI as the information feeder, but they still have to sort of try to make use of their own brain as much as possible in order to sort of stand on the shoulder of AI in order to improve their own creativity.
That's an important one too, because one of the things that we know about idea generation is the key aspect of it is to separate idea generation from idea selection. And so what you've just described is actually doing that. If you're treating it as a collaborator, great, generate. And then what's our process as a team for how are we going to select what things to prototype, for instance?
I think too, because I came from the creative industry, we encourage idea generation. We discourage selection until the very end. But in other organizations, they prioritize selection up front, where you know it's not going to work because here's the criteria. But actually, you don't know until you put all the ideas on, and there are combinations of ideas that could then skirt around the restrictions.
Yeah, because you could be throwing away stuff that you could actually work.
Yeah, but we've all worked with so many people before where your bosses go, no, that can't work because of these things. But you go, chill. Let's generate all the ideas, put it up, and then let's figure out, and then see what can work or not.
Yeah, you need to be able to look at all the stuff there and go, okay, which ones do I want to try out? Which ones do I want? Which ones do I think will work for the context? What we've gotten out of this is that creativity is something that is very much something that can be developed. It has to be nurtured. It has to be encouraged. It's not easy because it's like the question you asked just now about having to, if your bosses don't tolerate failure, and then, what's the incentive to be creative and all that kind of thing. But we have to try. But I think in ourselves, we do need to believe that we are creative. Know that you are creative. I think be curious, be open-minded, look around you, be empathetic, right? Think about things. Don't take things for granted. And it's not about the eureka moment either. Very often it takes time, it takes persistence, it takes willingness to fail, right? And it takes willingness to take risks as well. And a lot of support, I guess, and encouragement and belief that you can do it. Yeah. And so I think on that note, we do have to wrap up.